my heart goes to the very essential verities of the faith, the position, incomparable, unimaginable position of Baha'u'llah, and the importance of communicating, even if it be in a gradual way, with the friends that are associating with us and taking part in Baha'i activities and becoming Baha'is. And the letter that the Guardian wrote to the Baha'is of the West, called the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, I'm sure many of you know about that letter. He says that he summarizes in this letter the essential verities of the Baha'i religion. And the quotes are not probably what you would imagine they would be. I mean, you would think they would be about the principles and things that we all know about. Instead of that, they characterize the distinction of Baha'u'llah in a period of 500,000 years. We're just kind of growing up to understanding what that may mean. And it's been instilled, he says, in every atom of existence. And then he elaborates the Guardian elaborates some of the essential teachings from the Book of Certitude in characterizing the nature of progressive revelation. Progressive revelation really being the key to the unification of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the Baha'is Faith, and the Baha'i Faith. What? The unification? What? The unification. We're not talking about friendly interfaith gatherings and sweetness. We're talking about it's going to become one faith, one God, one faith on the whole planet. It takes a long time to go there, and we will have to be observing it from other kingdoms than this one, I'm afraid, because as far as I can see, it's going to be 500 years just warming up to the process of global unification. We're going to have a lesser peace. We're going to go through nightmares, and we come to a period where the world consolidates itself and reaches out. The wisest men of all the countries will gather in a gathering, and they will decide certain things and set humanity on something of a corporeal justice, justice of the living. But then the Guardian pointed out the next stage after this political unification of mankind, which takes place actually outside the faith, not in the faith. It's based on the vibrations and energy released by Baha'u'llah's revelation, but it's realized by that, the influence of that on politicians and rulers and leaders of thought in the world. Then our job, and this is coming up gradually percolating in local activities at the moment, and neighborhood activities, if you will, is the spiritualization of that unification. The lesser piece is unification of mankind. The most great piece is the spiritualization of that unification through recognition and embracing Baha'u'llah and the energies that he's released into the world, which are those transforming energies which every soul needs in order to make it into the kingdom of God. It's a no simple thing. We want to never forget this fact, that we're Baha'is because of Baha'u'llah, not because of social action or the importance to feed the hungry or all of those things, not unimportant. But the reason, the motivation for us in serving humanity, in loving humanity, comes from the revelation itself. If it doesn't come from the revelation itself, we're busy building a career of doing good things and being proud of it in ourselves, which is basically a veil to our being able to fulfill the requirements of the hidden words, where Baha'u'llah says that our spiritual lives should become polished to the extent that we see with his eyes and we hear with his ears. What an extraordinary role he's calling upon us to play. And that means with that insight and with that hearing, we can proclaim in a manner that's confirmed by the Holy Spirit to the souls and help to awaken them. Because without that, he says, without that divine confirmation and teaching, there's no result. There's no result of people becoming Baha'is. They may like it, they may be attracted, but if you want, even they may say, I am a Baha'i. But there are other stages. And I just suggest, if you haven't read the Dispensation lately, or if you've never read it, go and find it and read it. It's not an easy read, but it's an essential read, fundamental. And we should strive. He said, it's impossible that we ever understand the dimensions of this order that Baha'u'llah has brought, of this new global vision that he has infused into the world. But we have to be trying all the time, and that trying creates in us a certain, if you will, understanding or an intellectual condition within us where we begin to derive more and more understanding from the verses of God, the revealed texts of, like the Gleanings and Hidden Words and the Kitabi Gan, the books you know that are the essential writings of the faith. Last night I was thinking about, I wanted to share with you something that is maybe won't be of immediate interest to you, but I think it's important to hear it because you don't hear it, you won't see it in the writings. It all comes from pilgrim notes. And pilgrim notes have to be taken with a certain amount of caution. This subject arose in my mind particularly in a strong way when I traveled in South America with the hand of the cause Ina Kolinga. Ina Kolinga came from Africa and visited the countries of South America. But Mr. Olinga wasn't familiar with so many Western habits, and he wasn't familiar with the Spanish and Portuguese languages, so somebody had to help to get him through the different frontiers and arrange visas and consult with the assemblies. I was a counselor in South America, and it fell to me, because I was free at that time, full-time serving the cause, to accompany him. And I was with him for 3 months, night and day. And that was a glorious period of my life and my services. He was so buoyant. He could get depressed a little with the frustrating situations we sometimes met, and with difficult cultural characteristics. For instance, in Bolivia and Chile, they believed that if you pinched a black man, it was good luck. And you had crowds of 300 people pressing in, all reaching to pinch Mr. Olinga, and him saying, "Get me out of here." Poor man. Amazing. The African American pioneers in South America had a challenge with that always, because the people were it's like it was their privilege to go and give you a pinch. In the course of time with him, he shared with me some of his own experiences. He had become a Baha'i in Uganda as an adult. He drank a lot at that time. Everything was new to him in the faith. Shoghi Effendi, when he named the Hands of the Cause in the message to the Baha'is of the world, he refers to that one of the hands has come from pagan background. And that pagan background was Mr. Olinga. He arose almost immediately he became a Baha'i in the 2-year plan before the World Crusade. So that was 51 to 53. And he was on the local assembly of Kampala. And he straightened his life out. And when the Guardian announced the 10-year crusade, I think 3-4 members of that local assembly, African members of that local assembly, arose to be Knights of Baha'u'llah in foreign countries that they had no idea where they were going or what they were doing. You think, Africa's all Africa. They're all Africans. They all know each other. They all understand each other. No. There's so many cultures in the African continent. Also, South America is not one homogeneous thing. Every country is distinct, and within that country are all kinds of regional cultures and ideas. In any case, Mr. Nakshivani and his wife drove these African volunteers from Kampala, from Uganda, to the west coast of Africa. And each one settled one of these African countries, alone, without a language. I mean, they knew English, and some of them were English background, but a lot of them were French, and then they had, of course, their own tribal languages. Mr. Olinga was a torch of excitement in this process. It was a very difficult trip. There's the history of that can be read and so on. But he got to Cameroon, and Cameroon was divided between French Cameroon and British Cameroon, and he settled British Cameroon. And within the first year of his teaching, work alone there were 100 new Baha'is. And this caught Shoghi Effendi's attention. And he said, he gave a title for Mr. Olinga. He said his title is Abu Futu, the father of victories. Well, needless to say, Enoch Olinga was very devoted to the Guardian, to the messages, to the encouragement that he came to him through that divine source, and applied for pilgrimage, and he went on pilgrimage. And he said, I got there as a pilgrim, and they told me that you're not going to stay in the pilgrim house with the Western pilgrims. You're going to go to the Eastern pilgrim house, which sounds a bit strange, but was very important because Shoghi Effendi would have dinner with the Western pilgrims, but the Eastern pilgrims, the men, stayed at the pilgrim house, and he came in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock every afternoon, and walked with them to the shrines and prayed with them and explained things to them. So there were no Eastern pilgrims, as it turns out, and I'm sure that was why he was sent there. He said, Shoghi Effendi said that Dr. Hakim should go there and cook for me and take care of me while I was at the pilgrim house. So Dr. Lotfullah Hakim was later one of the first members of the House of Justice, and also secretary of Shoghi Effendi, Eastern secretary of Shoghi Effendi. In the course of the visit, Mr. Olinga told me, he said, Shoghi Effendi taught me all things. He didn't say it in a prideful way, but it was very interesting because like every subject you think of, something. For instance, one day the Guardian told me, he said that you see these ugly roads all over, they'll all be torn up in the future because aerial travel will become the norm. Even individual will be aerial travel. Oh, my goodness. And then he said the gardens will be placed in place of these ugly roads and things. And he said the houses will be separated from each other with ample space around them. And the houses will all derive all of their needed energies and necessities from the atmosphere. They won't have to be connected to grids of all kinds of things, the way we are now. That was it. So that was quite interesting. He's telling me about everything. And he said he characterized society here as being very backward. Very backward. And he said that the master said that this planet is the most backward of all the planets of our solar system. So that piqued Mr. Olinga's interest, and then he said, I asked the guardian about what is the universal manifestation? And Baha'u'llah is a universal manifestation for 500,000 years. What is that? What does that mean? And he said that the reality of the universal manifestation is in all the prophets of God. That's one of their twofold stations. The second station is their individual assignment or mission from God for the time when they appear. And this is why, relatively, what Baha'u'llah has brought us is so unique, because it is the consummation of the social, spiritual evolution of the people on this planet. Granted, as I was trying to suggest, it's going to take a long time. Especially we seem to be going the other way right now, down the tubes, and the old order is being rolled up as Baha'u'llah predicted it would be. He said Baha'u'llah, his role is the manifestation of God for the people on this planet. And for the first 4 stages after death, other stages of existence. I mean, he said, we're supposed to go through endless worlds, he promises the believers. So that was very curious, because I'd never seen anything in the writings about 4 stages. I mean, unless it's something like 4 valleys, but you can't quite stick all that together. And Mr. Linga said when he said it was the most backward of the planet, when he implied that this planet is the tail of the dog of the solar system we live in. He said, I looked a little startled, I think, because Shoghi Effendi riveted me, and he said, they still make war. People created by God to live in harmony, provided with everything they need to have a happy life on a planet, far excelling anything like climate crisis. All of that is ignored, and people engage in war. So you can see this is a very important change point when we finally give up war altogether on the planet. Now, out of that, in discussions with Mr. Ling, I understood that the souls, our souls, after death, go to the heaven of this planet, not to the heaven of the universe, not to the heaven of trillions, billions, inestimable numbers of souls that we wouldn't know anybody and wouldn't know anything. We go where our mothers and fathers have gone, where our sisters and brothers have gone, where our dearest friends are. And it's an easy transition, and it's a marvelous, light-shedding experience of upliftment. So I think that's interesting to realize that each of the planets has its own system. And Baha'u'llah has said, and this is a text, not a pilgrim note, Baha'u'llah said that every fixed star has planets, and every planet has its creatures, and no one can calculate the number of them. Have you seen that in the writings? It's in the gleanings. You can see it in the gleanings. Do we have any, goes in your head, we're talking about 1867, 68, he's saying these things. That time, there was no telescopes that were reaching out very much more than showing the planet as a little bigger piece of light. So I've thought about these things for a long time. Mr. Lingo went on his way back to Africa and was brutally murdered by political forces in the country. It'd be nice to say he was a Baha'i martyr, but all the neighboring families, one at a time, were being murdered in that period by, what can you call them, ruthless actors on the scene. I got thinking a lot about it, and I wondered was there anything else in the writings? Could I find anything else? I found the Tablet of Abdu'l-Baha, where he says that the other planets, the creatures on those planets, are created in conformity with the chemical constitution of those planets. So we say to ourselves, oh, that planet doesn't have any oxygen. How can there be creatures? No, this is not far beyond God's power to create all kinds of variety. But we know the order of mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. And we know that the very purpose of creation is the maturation of the human soul, that it becomes like a light that reflects the sun, that it understands and speaks with the words of God and thinks with the thoughts that are in the divine revelation. This creates a whole new situation. I think that when we talk about a divine civilization coming in the future, we shouldn't think in terms of everybody will have a fancy new car and a boat and I don't know. The stupidity of humanity presently thinking what's important materially. Things are not important. So I got that far. Then I found, searching through some of the papers that I had access to, as I was very involved with the research work in Haifa for those 22 years that I was on the house. And I found some notes that hadn't been circulated. First of all, some of you older Baha'is may know about the Maxwell notes. These were notes that were dictated to Ruhiya Khanum and her mother by the guardian when she had come for eventually marrying the guardian. And there he says that the next stage of development is contact with other planets. So I thought, well, that's curious. Then there was a marvelous lady, friend of Ruhiya Khanum, that came on pilgrimage, and the guardian liked her very much and invited her to stay and be one of his secretaries. And he gave her the power, the permission, to write down notes at the table. Pilgrims were not allowed to write at the table with the guardian at dinner. But Ethel Ravel and this lady were given that capacity, and they wrote notebooks full of things. And I found there was a passage about one evening when he talked about the question of the planets. What did he say? He started with the review of the various stages of social evolution on the planet. The evolution of the family in the early days of Adam and so on. Then Moses and the tribes, the development of tribal consciousness. Then the city-states that developed in the time of Christianity. Finally, the concept of individual, independent nations, nationhood, in the time of Islam. He said these were accompanied by the revelations of the manifestations of God that have appeared in the Adamic cycle right up to the time of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. It's about 6,000 years. And now it's the consummation of those various stages of development. And he tells us this new stage is world unity, is the unification, the recognition of the oneness and wholeness of the human race, that we're all one entity, we're all intimately connected in ways that we don't really fully understand how much we are connected. Besides what you hear about in pandemics, we're connected in all kinds of good ways. And he got to that stage in the talk, and he said, now the next stage is contact with a near planet. And he said there'll have to be a lesser manifestation, a manifestation of God that will come and define the relationship between people on this planet and creatures on that planet. Then he said gradually that development with other planets will encompass the solar system, this star system, our own solar system. And that will require a manifestation of a universal proportion who will come and unite the solar system into one stellar unity. However, he says, they wrote down, she wrote down, however, they, in order to contact other planets on other solar systems, will need to conform much more completely to the laws of love. That there are powers that only unfold in human reality through full recognition of the manifestation and great love for him. And that opens the doors then to everything. And then they'll be able to make, what, strangely enough, in the press we're reading occasionally something leaks out about beings from other planets that seem to move back and forth with terrific speed. Otherwise, you don't want to take 400 years to get to another star system. I kind of don't think anybody's going to sign up for that. They might sign up for Mars, but that's a nearer proposition. Then he said that gradually then those star systems are also going through this evolution that we've gone through here. And there will begin to be unifications of star systems. Can you imagine? So we have then the first galactic unity. A galactic unity of spirituality. And then he says, after that will come cosmic unities of various degrees. By that time, the audience, the pilgrims were kind of melting in their chairs, I guess, I don't know. And this dear lady writes down, Shoghi Effendi, when he started talking about those higher stages, he was looking at the ceiling, and his face was radiating light. And he said, and then likewise, in the spiritual realms, similar unifications will be taking place. So it's not finished in the other world. The unification, he says, Baha'u'llah says, I have come to unite all who are in the heavens and on the earth. All unite in heaven, certainly everybody in heaven is united. That's the kingdom of God, so no, it's not. There's a struggle on the other side that souls that are stuck with belief in the manifestation of God of their era haven't made it through, and they have to hear about it, and they have to recognize the living power of the universal manifestation. There are tablets of Baha'u'llah where he talks about traveling in the other world, where he visited communities, and they welcomed him warmly, but they didn't recognize who he was. And he would give them the solution to the problems that they were constantly thinking about. One of these communities, the system was how far up your arm you have to wash when you do your ablutions in the obligatory prayers. And there were those that had one opinion, those that had another opinion, and they never resolved this. And they spent their whole eternity discussing these things, and Baha'u'llah is trying to lift them up and show them another stage. Nothing. And he goes through several communities and he names the problems that they were stuck with. We're talking, do you realize the next world is nothing less than this world? I mean, society is complete. There's everything, architecture, there's music, there's everything in its most sublime form comes from there. The writings clearly tell us that there's no invention on man's part. He receives inventions from the detached souls that live in the other realm, who communicate to people who prepare themselves sufficiently, like scientists who are trying to understand this or that, and they get an inspiration, and they have a dream, and they have a new thought. All of this is coming from the other realm. If you think you're going someplace dull, a couple of old pioneers in the Pacific, Persian friends, they made a pact, the three of them. They said, we're all about to go our way, so whoever gets there, communicate something about the next world back to this world. So the first one dies, and months pass, and nothing happens. And then the second one had a dream. The first one came to him, and he said, I'm not allowed to explain about this world. This is one of the things about God. He doesn't give us all this information. The bits and pieces come here and there. Because if we knew it so well, if we understood it so well, we would all choose the good. But he wants us to not choose the good. He wants us by free will to choose the way of God in our lives here. And our day is full of opportunities to follow the will of God or listen to the murmurings of the embodiments of satanic fancy, as he says, as he calls them. So we have this whole cosmic picture, and we have whatever our role in it is, in which we will gradually, he says, all of you will attain to all these worlds. Just goes on and on. So, I forgot to say what the old man said. He said, I'm not allowed to say anything, but I want to tell you one thing. It's very busy. We all think we're going to our eternal hammock, We're going to lie there, and I'm going to rest for 1,000 years, and all that kind of nonsense. No. Very busy. You'll be busy right away. Abdullah says he had a dream of one of the hands of the cause that had already died. And he saw him. He said he was corpulent in this world, and he's corpulent in that world. He said to the master, he said he'd just come back from a district spreading the fragrances of God. And Abdul-Baha comments that that is the term for teaching the cause of God in the next world. And he incorporates it in the Will and Testament, his own Will and Testament. He said the first duty of the hands of the cause of God is to diffuse the divine fragrances. And then the first duty then of the teachers is to diffuse the divine fragrances. Are you diffusing divine fragrances? Are you thinking about it? Are you asking God to help you diffuse divine fragrances? Which it seems to me we're all being called upon to do. So that's all ahead of us. And I wanted to share that part of, in case you think that the evolution is going to end here with this difficult situation politically that we have, an illusion that's created, and human beings that think they can make a better world order than the one provided and instilled into the world by Baha'u'llah. It's not going to happen. Everything goes down. In fact, the Master predicts, he said, it will go down so bad and get so dark that people, their main occupation will be begging God to let me die. And Baha'u'llah says there's not unity between two souls on this planet. The kind of unity that is supposed to take place, the spiritual unity that's supposed to take place, where your light and my light, or whoever's light, reflects on each other. And as it says, it's dazzling. It's light upon light. And it lifts both of you. Now imagine when the whole room, like our room here, is full of that, all of us relating that way. What kind of spirit it is. It attracts the divine spirit. One more thing that I want to mention to you is, I hope you'll look carefully at the Igon. It's very important to read the Book of Certitude over and over. Shoghi Effendi said to read it, then he said to reread it, then he said to study it, then he said to master the contents so that you can repeat them, because that is the most effective way to teach souls. And then he said, and besides mastering it, memorize certain passages. So he's given us a whole kind of formula. How do we deal with the holy writings? That then, one of the things that we find in there is that the Blessed Beauty says that all beings live, move, and have their being in the manifestation of God. There's the talk of the Master in Paris. These are not things easily recognized by us. They seem to be the opposite, because we think we're so independent and we're kind of our own bosses and, all the kind of things we think, which are really the veils that keep us from seeing him. He's in us, he says, he's closer to us than our life vein. The fact that we can think, he said, it's the power of the Holy Spirit that's being infused into us from the manifestation of God. How much we have to learn, friends, about what we are, what kind of creatures we are. What is our proper identity? What is our future? And how much bringing our lives into conformity with these requirements will advance the cause of God. Now, I saw a tablet from Abdu'l-Baha. I'm leaving the Holy Land after 37 years of service in the Holy Land, thinking, well, it wasn't too bad, kind of. I did something, I'm sure. Then I found this tablet. Sorry to confess my shortcomings, but I found this tablet, and Abdu'l-Baha says clearly in the tablet, he says, the service of the friends belongs to God, not to them. And there's a verse in the Gleanings. Take it in. All good comes from God, and all evil from your own selves. This animal nature we have is the source of the... Can you still hear me? Yeah. Are you still listening? Is the source of all evil. You can turn that thing on its head and you can say, no good comes from moi. No good comes from me. All and no evil comes from God. As I understand it from the divine text, the energy that comes from God is the source of all life. The fact that the human ego can transform that energy into wickedness is our doing, not his doing. He's provided with that possibility so that we will learn the difference between good and evil. How would we know what light is if there were never darkness? How would we know the concept of health if there were not illness? How would we understand what sight is if there were no blindness? Abdu'l-Baha says this over and over. So that's why these lower aspects of our nature which are coming from our animal parts, need to be overcome, and the manifestation comes to teach us, to show us how to transcend that. And then, as the Master says, we make a resolution, then we fail it. Oh God, I'm going to do better. I'm not going to do that again. We all know which one we have to give up, the next thing we're supposed to give up. We all say to ourselves, could I just give up this second one instead of the first one, because it's so difficult to give that up. We know our own shortcomings better than anybody else, he says. And the Master says, then you fail again and you fail again. He told this to Dr. Getzinger, one of the early Baha'i pilgrims, one of the early Baha'i American Baha'is. Finally, he says, the soul, after resolving and failing every time, making promises and not fulfilling them, gets to a stage of desperation. And he finally throws himself on the threshold of Baha'u'llah or of God, or however you want to view it, and begs, you take it away. I can't take it away. And then the Master says it disappears. But like the onion, there's under that skin, there's another one that has to be dealt with. And that's our life here. Whole life. Happy life.
I heard you went pioneering at the age of 21 to Nicaragua.
Yes.
What makes you choose this South American country? And please share some of your challenges.
I wanted to rise to be a pioneer, but Shoghi Effendi had sent to Southern California to say that he wanted to see a veritable exodus of Baha'is from there to the goals of the crusade. And the World Crusade had goals to open countries, but it also had a whole series of goals to consolidate countries that were already open to the faith. And Nicaragua was where I went, was one of those countries that had pioneers for, maybe 30 years already, 20 years, and with various degrees of success and a few first believers. Wasn't very consolidated yet, and it needed to. So that was one of the goals. There were a series of goals that the National Assembly made a list of, similar to what they're doing, the House of Justice has done now, in this second 9-year plan. And so it was going to be either the Caroline Islands or Fairbanks, Alaska, or Managua, Nicaragua. I got a job in Managua, Nicaragua, teaching English on the basis that I could speak English. That was about my qualification as a professor. But I got there and they called me Professor Dunbar. I was Professor Dunbar because they can't say N in front of a B. It's an M always. Unfortunately, there had been a circus that had just come through called the Circo Dunbar. So everybody thought I was connected to that circus, somewhat a personality. 2 months later, a film that I had a major part in, a 20th Century Fox film called Bernadine. I think it's a little too old for you guys to have seen it or know about it. But anyway, it showed up, and the projectionist at the presidential palace that showed the films for the president and his family and so on was a student of mine, and he saw me. He said, that's my professor here in Managua. So they invited me up to teach English to the press secretary of the president. He sent this is a old-time regime, the Somoza regime. Nobody knew what was up in the presidential palace. And they sent an air-conditioned limousine to take me up there and to teach this guy an hour of Time magazine every week. That was pretty interesting. But eventually I got into the other side of the country. After having hepatitis, this serum hepatitis, the one that there's no cure for, they told me, the doctor told me, he said, you have to rest. I'm saying rest completely. Rest, do not read a book. Rest, do not answer the phone. Rest. I couldn't have read a book. In fact, eventually I couldn't roll out of bed to go to the bathroom. Such a weakness it is, that full-on one, and then at that time there was no remedy at all. He gave me some sugar candies. He said, maybe the sweetness, the sugar of this sometimes helps people. It's just a joke, really. So I recovered from that, and I went off to the east coast of Nicaragua, which is a rainforest with various rivers, with tribal peoples living on the rivers that never have seen the capital, and there's no road from Managua to the other side of the country because the dense jungle the whole thing is rainforest and jungle. You have to go by bus to the end of a bus line about halfway across the country, and then you take canoes down the river, and eventually you get to a steamboat that takes you out to the ocean. And that was where I paraded around for 4 years with all kinds of stomach parasites and every kind of infection you can think of. Teaching the faith as best I could. One thing is to stand up here and give a talk. Another thing is to have an audience and you have upset stomach and diarrhea. You still speak, If I would speak, and then I would run off at the end of the talk. To a small group of Indians, Central American Indians, who knew some English because it had been an English protectorate for a while. And the Anglican Church had insisted on English. That was a big help. You had to translate what you wanted to say into something that they could understand. Baha'u'llah, one big man got light in the face. That was the way we introduced Baha'u'llah. Crazy. Dr. Muhajir came, he said, talking to a group of believers, he said, you see this branch here? He said, pull one of those leaves off. Pulled it off. Give it to me. He says, see this leaf? What's going to happen to this leaf now that it's not connected to the tree? And he said, well, it's going to dry. It's going to die. He said, that's what's happened to us when we're not connected to God. We need to be connected to the teachings of God. And he used all kinds of very simple examples like that. Lovely. So, please.
In the Ruby books and from letters that we've had from the House of Justice, there's an emphasis from time to time about the importance of the arts. And I know that you are a prolific artist, and I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the inspiration that you might have through your art or with your art, and how it balances your contribution. It seems that right now in our culture there's a desire to take away the arts in many places. And I wonder what that would mean to our society if that happened, and then also what it would mean if arts flourish, and what it means to you personally. Somewhere in there.
That's very good. I think we need another couple nights for that. What I could say is that I think the arts have already been destroyed. I mean, fine arts is practically dead. It's the subject matter that occupies artists in so many cases. Not the everyday artists. They're still occupied with the real thing, but the professional ones and the selling of paintings for millions of dollars that are a stencil of somebody's face or something, it gets ridiculous, really ridiculous. People say, what does this painting mean? Can you explain this painting? I said, no, if I could explain it, if I could write it, I wouldn't have to paint it. It's cribbing Picasso, who said the same thing when he was asked what's the meaning of one of his paintings. Yeah, I kind of have them in separate categories. Not that I pray, and I have, obviously, thinking about all these subjects that we're talking about tonight, reading about them, thinking about them. But I don't say a prayer and cross myself over the painting. The painting is a painting. It's an abstract painting, and it has to do with the kind of thoughts that are ruminating and coagulating within the spirit of one's own nature. And so we all have independent contributions we could make. It's worked out all right. I've placed about 500 paintings around the world in different collections and things, and have some more. And it's a bit sorry, a bit wistful to say that now it's a year I haven't painted. I painted 3 paintings, but I was very prolific before that. I don't know, and I don't quite understand how individual artists relate to the community in terms of artistic activities in the community. For children, particularly youth, maybe. I don't know what you've been doing here. I try to listen a bit about that. Sometimes people ask questions like yours about how do we get arts into the faith, but the Baha'i art is going to come along when this spirit of the faith prevails in society. It will awaken all kinds of finer arts. In fact, Shoghi Effendi said they will be superior to anything of the past religions, but will not be less than them in the sense that if you think of the Hindu architecture, or you think of Mayan architecture, or you think of Islamic arts, they're recognizable, they're coherent, they're profound. We don't have anything like that yet in the faith. We have a few Baha'i painters. Mark Tobey was extraordinary. Wish I could tell you more about that.
What about the temples? Are they an expression of art in the world?
Which one?
The temples, I mean, the Indian temple.
No, I think so, yes, certainly. The dreams and visions of the one that created the Mother Temple here in America. His story is very interesting. And the temple is built, it's decorated according to his design on the exterior, but they didn't have the money for the interior. And we're going to have to go back now and create the interior for the house of worship in the future with his full design, which is much more like the exterior of the temple. But that's something ahead. Let's see. Yes, sir.
So you briefly mentioned the souls in the next world being very preoccupied and very busy. My father passed away recently, and many people have had dreams about him. And something in common with a lot of the dreams were that he comes to them and just says, I'm fine, I'm really busy, I gotta go. So my question to you is, what are all these people doing? Okay, shed some light on what there is.
You know how busy we are here with everything. So there are all kinds of roads of discovery and application and service to others in the next world too. This world is a counterpart of that world. Everything in this world is first been in that world before it comes to this world. Now that turns the whole of this materialistic science that we're worshiping on its head. It has to be the material discoveries also in the light of spiritual truth. It's going to take a while to get there, I think, but I'm glad your father's busy.
I don't know exactly the question, except I would like to hear your perspective on, there's so many young people, they grow up and learning about the faith and touched by it, and others that are not high, and they find themselves struggling with their sexuality and why are they not attracted to the other sex. A lot of young people, as you know, have killed themselves over that frustration and not fitting in to their family's expectations, society. And I know that's a topic that is, we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, very challenging, difficult topic.
But maybe your some thoughts.
First of all, first principle of the faith, so we love all mankind. We don't love them necessarily for their shortcomings, but we love them because the human species has been created by God and it has the potential to reveal Him to us. Corinne True eventually became a hand of the cause and was really the mother of this temple that we have here in the States. Was on pilgrimage in 1909, and she said, she's written that in the last meeting that we had with Abdu'l-Baha, he brought her and the daughters together and he said, now, when you go out, he said, when you meet a soul, a new soul, and you want to speak to them, think of that as a message from your beloved. It doesn't matter that it's stained with coffee or that the outer envelope is dirty or inside is something created by God that you want to address. So interesting, this concept. It's like Abdullah saying, every face I look and I see the face of Baha'u'llah, because he's the sustenance and life force of that human being. We have a lot to learn, I think it seems to me, about the role of the manifestation and all the prayers and meditations. This book, Prayers and Meditations of Baha'u'llah, is a treasure house for unlocking those kinds of mysteries. Thank you.